Hello, my name is Brant Hunt, and my channel simply is Discerning What is True. I'm going to be reading from the book by Phil Langdon, Revelations of the Holy Spirit, Decoded. The chapter I'm going to be reading today is chapter 11, and this would also deal with what I call the issue of justice by the cards here, the Rider-Waite cards, or the tarot cards here. As you can see, I'm sharing you with this. Welcome you guys here. We're going to be reading chapter 11. And chapter 11 is simply called The Two Witnesses. I'm always learning something from Phil Langdon. Incredibly knowledgeable person, but also incredibly loving person. Enormously just a completely different person than most people you would ever meet. Has a good heart and has a good mind. And he's found heaven. He's found heaven with himself. You know, it says in John, you are the light. Many people do not understand that. Is what I'm understanding from what Phil Langdon is that we are the light. Unfortunately, we don't understand what goes on with our head. And that's part of what the Bible is all about, is trying to explain to you, share things deeply by the Jewish writers, that you must do something. You must decide to pursue this with all your energy and try to learn. Long ago, there were what we call mystery schools that actually related this information, but that's no more. That was pretty much destroyed, or it actually has been destroyed by the church. The Catholic Church destroyed that. And the writers of the Bible are incredibly brilliant writers. They've written what I call two stories within one. What I mean by that is that most people will read it in a literal terms or historical terms, and actually some will believe it and say, "Great, this is salvation," and be supported by the church in that way. And others will see it as we have seen today. Many people say, "No, that's not true. That's based upon some person that you created, some Jesus, such and such, and we have no proof that even Jesus actually lived." Unfortunately, people don't go the third way. And the third way simply is wait a minute. You know, it can't be literal. It can't be historical. There was no historical Jesus. There was no literal Jesus. There wasn't any of these so-called miracles and all this and all the things we talked about in the Old Testament. How the Jews supposedly killed all these people, when reality simply is that there were nobody killed. It's some myths. They're stories ingrained to show something. This is why the Jews themselves actually are involved in Hollywood, because they write stories. They write 3-act plays. All Hollywood is that's all about. That's been since the conception over 100 years ago. And yet most people are unaware of that, you see. So let's get into the reading of the two witnesses here, which is chapter 11. Thank you for being here. Hope that you have ears to hear, and I hope that you have eyes to see. Okay, let me find that particular book here. Let's see where you're at right here. The two witnesses. Justice. The 11th tarot card wears no blindfold, you see, and sees into our hearts. Let me do one other thing so it's a little easier for me to read. Magnifier. It requires us to be honest with ourselves and our lives and act accordingly. If we want to see the truth in everything, we will. Justice is the impartial truth at hand. Applying the principles of justice to the act of ascension, we can see what it takes to see God face to face. That is total self-honesty. You know, this is something that people, most people put on what I call a show. They try to be somebody that they're not. And this is the whole issue of why people struggle. This is why there's what we call mental diseases too, because people are actually not being real. They are putting on a facade, you see. And so what we're looking at right now is chapter 11. Like I said, the people need to be real. And this is what Phil is trying to explain here. Let's continue here. All their lower physical issues are stripped, you see, of value in ascension. When all things physical are removed from sight, leaving the only true reality, the vision of the Son of God, in the blackness of chaos and void. The 11th Hebrew letter is Kaf, K-A-F, which represents the number 20. The design of Kaf is like a pipe bent in two places. The concept of bending oneself represents submission to a greater force and entity, the King of all kings. Almighty God, the letter Kaf, the letter Kaf, to bend oneself, to submit to the crown, the King, God, the ruler of the universe. One of the meanings of the letter Kaf is spoon. That is, the root of the word spoon is kafa, K-A-F-F, to bend. This notion of submission and humility can be seen clearly in the difference between the words anachi and ana. Both mean I. When a person walks around all day and says, I, he has a problem with his egoism. Kessler, that is K-E-S-S-E-R, the king's crown, is comprised of two levels, pleasure and desire. That should be probably, I think, Jester, maybe he's got here. It says Kester. We'll see what I have. It has also been described as representing the internal and external aspect of the king. In the case, internal refers to the king's relation to himself, while external, it is his relationship to the world, his kingdom. Now let's read the chapter 11 here. Verse 1. I was given a reed like a measuring rod and was told, quote, go and measure the temple of God and the altar and count the worshipers there. Verse 2, but exclude the outer court, do not measure it, because it has been given to the Gentiles. They will trample on the holy city for 42 months. There's where the idea, the 3.5 years. Naturally, 12 times 3 is 36, plus 6 more is 42 months. So this is the concept that we talked about a little bit yesterday of the 3.5 years. And so what happens simply is that, again, this artwork is probably from a gentleman from France that I've talked about. I can't think of his name right now, but anyway, this is what it looks like here. I'm trying to show you this diagram. The temple is also you. You are the temple of God. You see. So it says some things here simply. So let's just go into the temple man. There's an altar. This would be where the feet are. And it would say simply is that certain part before you get right into what we call maybe not the courtyard, but the steps leading to the temple, that is where Boaz is. And then you have what I call the porch area where we see the great columns that are built in a church such and such. And then with that, this is where you wield layers showing as fingers in the hands. And this is the holy place, you see. So this is once you enter this, is also the body simply. This is basically from here, you're a little bit lower than your belly button, you begin, this is the holy place. And it goes all the way up to what we call the throat area. And then you have where the head is and what they call the Holy of Holies. So again, this reveals, again, your temple. And part of this is based upon Jacob's dreaming at Bethel. That is in chapter 28 of Genesis from 10 to 22. That is the lower part of the man. And then we have the stairway or ramp relates to Jacob's neck or throat. you see, or as some would say, Isaac's rock. Okay. And then you have what we call Jacob's pillar stone, which is actually where the last part of the temple is always somewhat lifted up. Okay. It's raised up. We can relate this passage to the Temple of Solomon, once it represents the human body and the creator, Adam Kotman, the cosmic being. At the human level, the temple of God is the head, you see, where the Son of God resides in the illuminate. The outer court, in these terms, is the rest of the body where the Gentiles trample for 42 months. According to James M. Price, P-R-Y-S-E, 42 months refers to the first half of the 7 years of initiation in the old world, where the effects of the lower samadhi divisions are still felt. Half of 7 is 3.5. This is how James and Price interpreted this number. Quote, the period of initiation here is placed at 7 years. So this is what we talked about also when you would go to the to discover basically who you were before there was even a concept of churches here. The mystery schools would be, you would go for 7 years. You would take 7 years out of your life to go to a mystery school and actually sit under someone who would teach these things to you. Okay? During the first half of which was 42 months, the lower forces continued. Okay, I'm something. Okay, so where in the latter half it is in the 1260 days, the dual electric force, the Ida and the Pingala, the two witnesses, will prevail nervous system, gradually and almost imperceptibly replacing the ordinary nerve forces, end quote. Without officially sanctioned mystery schools to draw its understanding from in the modern age, the ins and outs of intuition, I should say, have been lost to the ancient past. Of course it has. Yes, it was lost, truly, leaving us none the wiser as to the validity of this statement about initiation and its process. The author, James Price, did not experience ascension. Obviously didn't, you see. Even though he seemed to know a lot about it secondhand, he suggested that Kundalini Yoga is a practice that takes years to produce its effect. Spiritual union with God, on the other hand, occurs within a few days, not years. It takes years to get there, though, in the first place, though, you see. Of course, the heart chakra unites with God's blissful presence, rising to the throat chakra within a few seconds, within a few days, no more than a week. The initiated who remains in a state of bliss is ready to unify dual opposites intellectually and spark their ascension. The most this might take is a few days, not years. The coded numeral statement of 42 is distinctly divine number, derived by multiplying 3.5 by 12. The number of metaphysical and its cosmic product. By extension, 42 months is 42 times 30 days per month, which is 1,260 days, or 3.5 years. 3.5 times 12 months as an idealized coded notion of time, not a realistic one. This much is clear when we hear about 3.5 days spent in the desert, not years, as another nod to ascension later in the book. Verse 3, and I will give power to my two witnesses, and they will prophesy for 1,260 days, clothed in a sackcloth, end quote. So what does it mean by the word clothed in sackcloth? It's the same statement we read in Revelation chapter 6:14. The sun turned black like a sackcloth made of goat hair, an allegory for illumination, portrayed as the eclipse of the sun, being Leo by the moon, Cancer in the head. Fundamentally, God's two witnesses are rooted in the zero and infinity of metaphysical, you see, or metaphysics, I should say, simply because metaphysics is the blueprint of the human body as the microcosm, and ineffably God's witness are the two issues of reality. We, as God in the abyss and the cloud, there are the ultimate, quote, two witnesses, end quote, to the reality behind creation, taking the term literally. Physiology, that is, the two channels, Ida and Pengana, are the two witnesses to the central Shahuma, that is, Nadi, that sparks ascension, allegorically recorded in the New Testament as the, quote, the crucifixion of the physical man, flanked by two witnesses. So this is the idea of Jesus here, and the two witnesses would be the two on the cross. It also goes a lot in tangent with what we call the man, I'm going to wake up today. The booklet, I haven't tried to think about it in my mind here suddenly. It'll come to me. I've spoken about it many times. And let me get the book. That'll help my mind real quick. Which is simply called Kabbalah. I don't know why it slipped my mind, but anyway, this is an excellent book to get to. This is recommended by Bill Langdon. You can get this from Thames and Hudson. Tradition of hidden knowledge. And there's a lot of artwork in here in describing these things. This also shows the whole idea, what I was trying to explain to you, of the two witnesses, which are actually the masculine and the feminine. In some ways, you can look at it that way. If I can find the page here for you. This is part of it here. Right here. You also see it here also. Sorry about that, guys. Okay, where are we at? Okay, flanked by two witnesses. So, you know, again, this is revealing that these are all symbolic symbols for you to see here, folks. No one actually died on these crosses either, but it was a symbolic way of explaining the two witnesses, one on the right and one on the left. Verse 4, these are the two olive trees and the two lampstands that stand before the Lord of the earth. Verse 5, anyone tries to harm them, fire comes from their mouths and devours their enemy. This is how anyone who wants to harm them must die. The two olive trees are the two nadis, N-A-D-I-S, Ida and Pengana, that produce, quote, olive oil, metaphorically. The Lord of the earth is the Logos, the Son of God. Quote, fire comes from their mouths, end quote, is the dual electric fire of the two nadis as they enter the brain and influence the pituitary body. The death mentioned to those who want to harm the two witnesses refer to those who would ignite the system in themselves without encountering God, if such a thing is possible. The infusion of the dual fire in the brain is destructive. Then to those who are impure and not initiated by God, if they can produce this effect without being truly ready, which I doubt that. I don't think anyone could actually even do this unless they are ready for that particular deal. Verse 6, these men have power to shut up the sky so that it will not rain during the time they are prophesying, and they have power to turn the waters into blood and to strike the earth with every kind of plague as often as they want. Quote. The two witnesses, that is, explained by Phil Langdon, as the Ida and the Pengana, have the power to turn the head dark with the abyss. Then he has it in brackets here, simply is ether is the brain, as James Price puts it. As the central channel rises to join them in ascension, outside time and space, with the birth of the light, their sky, waters, and earth are now under divine authority. There will be no solar or lunar rain as before, because the moon has turned blood red, stained with the blood of the Lamb. That now has power over the waters and turns them to blood with its influence over the navel center, flooding it with desire for divinity, as opposed to acquisition and temporary saturation. The Lamb also has power over the lowest samadhi centers, having power to strike the earth continuously with its divine solution. So verse 7 says simply, now, when they have finished their testimony, the beast that comes up from the abyss will attack them and overpower and kill them. So it's not talking about a human person here, folks. These are all words to describe what really actually happens within you when you have this event. This is where people just get completely mesmerized, but then they're not ready for it, you see. They're not prepared. They have no idea, you see. And if you read something literally, and it's not supposed to be literally, you're not going to get the gist of it. So verse 8 goes on and says, their bodies will lie in the streets of the great city, which is figuratively called Sodom and Egypt, where also the Lord was crucified. End quote. Verse 9, for 3.5 days, men from every people, tribe, language, and nation will gaze on their bodies and refuse them burial. So Phil explains here, I think this is from Phil. Is this from Phil? Is this from, no, this is maybe from Phil, yes. The beast that will kill them, in parentheses, or I should say, quote, is likely the moment of the limited flies up in ascension as if dying. This is why you hear these things that when Jesus died, not died physically, but spiritually, meaning that he ascended to heaven. Well, heaven is not, it's in your head. See, this is what people, the concept, if you look at it metaphorically, or look at it, if you look at it literally and historically, you're not going to see this. And naturally, no one's going to see this because they're coming in with that particular presupposition. And this is someone who's sharing this because he's had the event. So he's not lying about any of this stuff. He's not profiting off of anybody. This is what I don't understand, why people don't, you see, people gravitate towards those who are famous and well off. How in the world can they be the prophet of God when they're well off and claiming to be somebody when they're not? I mean, this is very straightforward, but it just shows how blind people are. The beast that will kill them, that is likely the moment the illumination takes place that flies up to ascension, which I'm explaining with what happened to Jesus in a figurative way or in a symbolic way, you see, is as if dying. The author James M. Price suggests this is when regular consciousness resumes on the return. Apparently, their kundalini, quote, serpent, end quote, recedes to the solar plexus / navel, where it slumbers with 3.5 coils. The serpent coil, okay, and it's 3.5. You'll notice that how a serpent is shown. It has 3 coils, and then it has half part, which is basically when it's lifting up his head. Metaphysical number again, however, given the placement in the text, it follows more the natural process associated with the 6th chakra, now blowing with the 6th trumpet of the Archangel Raphael. Quote, the great city, end quote, is the human body, whose street is the spine. The street is perfectly straight, you see, is the spine, with its 3 nadis that contains the corpse of the witnesses. The 2 nadis, Ida and Pingala, kept from atrophied by the currents now flowing through the cerebrospinal nervous system. So there's something that takes place through your nervous system here also that causes this physical reaction. In other words, what happens is spiritual, but it's also physical within your body, you see. And this is what a lot of people struggle with, you see. So Josephus the Noahs is said here, Azusis, I should say, to Noahs, is said here to have been crucified in Sodom, also called Egypt. This is the first crucifixion, the incarnation of the soul in the physical body, which is then its cross. The second is in Calvaria, that is cranion, on the cross of initiation, end quote. This is again a quote from Apocalypse Unsealed by James M. Price in page 150. 3.5 days, or dus, is the metaphysical number applied to the body surrounding the cerebrospinal system that is now divinely powered. The various people from tribes and nations refer to the samadhi centers and the rest of the body. So Phil has a person sitting in a lotus position, and yet their head is as shaped as a pyramid. Okay. And you have one at the very top. You have the very top triangle, and then you have the 0, which is on the left side, and then you have what we call the event that takes place when you become 1, and then on the other side you have the infinity sign on the right. So it's a right pillar, and the left pillar has the 0, but the very top is 1. Verse 10, the inhabitants of the earth will gloat over them and will celebrate by sending each other gifts, that is, bribes, because these 2 prophets had tormented those who live on the earth. End quote. While the ascended illuminate is out of the body, that is deep in the abyss, the lowest physical center, that is, and in brackets he has inhabitants of the earth. So that reveals simply the earth as being, this makes sense here, folks. This is inhabitants of the earth. So they're using again the 4, the fire, water, air, and earth. It's portrayed as gloating over the disappearance of the spirit, as if physical nature has prevailed and there is a celebration. Verse 11, but after the 3.5 days, a breath of life from God entered them, and they stood on their feet, and terror struck those who saw them. End quote. Again, the metaphysical number is 3.5. Again, appears, referring us to the metaphysical completed life from the gross, that is the second arc of the 7 days, being kingdoms. So the gross means the second, in parentheses, and then the arc, A-R-C, of the 7 days. Then you have the days, you would have in the parentheses, you would say kingdoms of creation. The next thing, he has a quote here, during which the witnesses are lying morbid in a mystical, quote, solemn, from James and Price. Then it goes on and says, the breath of life from God then is general ascension at the end of the natural kingdoms, which strikes terror into physical nature. Verse 12 goes on and says, then they heard a loud voice from heaven saying to them, quote, come up here. Okay, come up here, says, all right, in parentheses, quote, and then went up to heaven in a cloud while their enemies looked on. Verse 13, quote, at the very hour there was a severe earthquake, and a tenth of the city collapsed. 7,000 people were killed in the earthquake, and the survivors were terrified and gave glory to the God of heaven. So there's some numbers here that start to stand out here. At the very hour there was a severe earthquake. So the earthquake would represent, again, the earth sign, in my opinion. And a tenth of the city collapsed. So 1/10. And apparently is of 7,000 people who died or killed in this earthquake. So what does 7,000 mean here? And it's a nice, perfect number again. So it's kind of standing out here. And it says, it's not 7,144. It's 7,000, which is to get your attention. It's not a perfect number, so to speak. When people die, let's say, for example, they're not just 7,000 people die. It's just a rounded off number. But there's this emphasis here on the 7. It's just like the feeding of the 5,000. Same thing. And why is that, you see? And we've talked about that in other videos. So here it is, quote, come up here, end quote, is a direct reference to ascension away from the physical body and world. Quote, their enemies looked on, end quote. The word hour is Horus or Haru, the hero who ascends and beats the devil of the dense physical world. This is the only true, what I would call the true hero on this planet, is someone who ascends. The hero ascends and heals the devil of the dense physical world. He defeats the devil of the devil means simply is the world, your body, the lack of spirit, you see, within you. You haven't forgotten who you are. You don't know who you are. A severe earthquake is the devastating effect on the lower centers. Okay, naturally, it would be the closest to the earth. Your feet are closest to the earth when you walk. The opposite of the divine, in effect. And the centers with the most to lose, quote, a tenth of the city, is the decon of the zodiac, referring to Draco, Draco, the red dragon, which connects to both passionate and sensual natures above and below it. So that's where you have here, you're showing the part of here at the very the head. You have up here, the beast. Then you have where you would say simply the red dragon is where your stomach here. And then when you get to the lotus division, lotus position, I should say, is the false seer. And here's another quote from James M. Price. The 7 is multiplied by the infinite number of 1,000 to indicate the many correlations of these lower principles. The, quote, men, end quote, whose, quote, names, end quote, are their psychic colors, which are obliterated. The remaining colors become brighter in the aura, or what we call, quote, glory, end quote, of the sky god. This is from his work again, The Apocalypse Unsealed, page 152, James M. Price. Verse 14, the second woe has passed. The third woe is coming soon. Verse 15, the 7th angel sounded his trumpet, and there were loud voices in heaven, which said, quote, the kingdom of the world has become the kingdom of our Lord, of his Christ, and he will reign forever and ever. You can see how the church gets this completely wrong. They now think this simply is that Jesus is going to reign on earth. This is the whole idea. We even get the idea even today. Same thinking. People do not understand. They're being pulled and swayed and don't understand it. They're trying to make this planet, Earth, perfect. When in reality, the Earth has never been perfect, so to speak. And it never will be. It's always been chaos on this planet. Look at what's going on in the news every day, folks. It's clear as bell that chaos is all around us. And it's a lot louder now than it has been when I was younger. It looks like, Russia's going to get involved in here. It looks like Ukraine's over here. We look like the Eastern Europeans are going to get involved over here. We have the issue with Israel, such and such, in Iran. All this stuff. That's chaos. It's also war signs. But that's always going on. How many wars has the United States been in? How many years of peace has the United States had? I would say simply less than 10 years the United States has been not at war with somebody. And they're talking about Vietnam, whatever, Korea, such and such, but they've been involved in other areas in the world. Most people don't even know this. Been involved in the Central American countries, South America, always messing with people. You see, always destroying something, trying to destroy the harmony, such and such. And I'm just using an example of the United States. In the past, it used to be other countries that did this stuff. You understand? There are loud voices, that is divine forces, that is, in brackets, in heaven, that is the brain. The kingdom of the world is the human kingdom of rationale, which has now seen the birth of God. Verse 16, and the 24 elders who were seated on their thrones before God fell on their faces and worshiped God. Verse 17, saying, quote, we give thanks to you, Lord God Almighty, the one who is and who was, because you have taken your great power and have begun to reign. If the 24 elders fall in worship, it's because they are one in the recognition of the eternal truth and unification that produces the Son of God as the royal sovereignty in the temple of God. And where's your temple? Up here. The buildings that are represented is just simply giving you an illustration of what, in fact, the architecture is trying to speak to you and saying, this is who you are. You see, they say, but it's a symbolic way of showing you that you are the temple of God. But most don't see that. Verse 18, the nations were angry, and your wrath has come. The time has come for judging the dead and for rewarding your servants, the prophets, and your saints, and those who reverence your name, both small and great, and for destroying those who destroy the earth. 19, Then God's temple in heaven was open. Well, that's talking about your head again. And within his temple was seen the ark of the covenant. And there came flashes of lightning, rumblings, peals of thunder, and earthquake, and great hailstorms. Well, obviously, there's going to be something to do with these elements here. You can see that lightning has to do with air, and the perils of thunder. Is that to do with the fire? Great earthquakes to do with, quote unquote, the earth? Of course it is. The peals of thunder are actually up in the air sign, okay? And the flashing of lightning is to do with the fire sign. The whole idea simply is the rumblings are from the water, and the last one, simply the earthquake, is representing the earth sign. The temple of God is opened in the head of Illuminate as they ascend to the ark of God's covenant in the ether. The element, the four elements eventually create the fifth. The completed five elements are then stated as, quote, flashes of lightning, fire, rumblings being water, peals of thunder, air, and earthquake being earth, and a great hailstorm, which is the lunar water or dash ether. Wrath comes as the righteous ferocity of the Son of God. The time has come for the highest center to reign and the lowest to be disposed. So that is the end of chapter 11 today. I'm going to say something else here. And this is something of an example. I think he talks about the 24 elders. We'll probably get into this later on. Phil will go into the 24 elders. Also, you'll see the symbol here, the star. It's just like the star of Israel, but it's more than that. Star of David, it's also more than that. Okay, it's what's called a tetrahedron, but it's, I think, more than a tetrahedron here. You can see how it was the symbol is. So that'll be the end of chapter 11 today, sharing this with you again from Phil's work called The Revelation of the Holy Spirit, Decoded. We're probably about halfway through. Actually, we are. I think there's 22 chapters, so that was 11 here today, and that is it. I'm just going to show something else here. Some things here. He has illustrations here of ascension. This is appendix of what they call the great work. I'll let you see this here. Let me see if I can turn this back around. See if I can make sure you can see it here. Let's see, can you see that, guys? A little bit crooked here, so it'll be like that. The symbols here are being shown in his work. Okay, so thank you for listening. Appreciate you. You have ears to hear. Like the very top, he has the tree of life, which is actually what you want to get on. You want to get off the tree of good and evil. You see, so it's a construct. You see, and part of that construct comes from a gentleman named from this guy, author M. Young, in this particular work. You see, where Phil actually uses some of his work. Now, remember, Phil is he was not what we call, what's the word? I guess his major in college was simply to do with mathematics and physics. So he wanted to know the hard science of what this was all about. And that's why he pursued it. He didn't pursue it because he was going to make any money at it. He pursued it simply, he was looking for the essence of truth, looking at facts, not fiction, so to speak. So thank you again for listening. I appreciate your attention. And hopefully the next few days, we'll get into the next couple more chapters. But at this point, I appreciate your attention and hope that you have ears and eyes to see the truth. It's very important, folks. So have a good day. We'll talk soon.